7 years, 3.3 billion, and LAX still doesn't have a working train. Why does it take nearly a decade to build less than 3 miles of railway? Everyone says the LAX train missed the deadline because of COVID, but COVID didn't write a contract, set the timeline, or design the decision-making structure. The real story is how a project with too many bosses and conflicting incentives turned into a slow-motion legal battle. As a project manager, I don't think this is about bad luck. It's bad governance. Let's dive deep into this.
Planning the future of LAX. Easier, faster, more efficient. Get to your plane on time without the stress. Easily transfer between terminals. Quickly access your rent-a-car or connect with Metro Light Rail. All this becomes a reality with the new automated people mover. Relax above traffic and enjoy the view. It's the easier, faster, more efficient future of LAX.
Ever wonder why things go completely sideways? Hi, it's Winnie's here, and this is Inside a Mess. We break down the chaos, find the surprises, and figure out what went wrong, so we don't repeat it. Personally, I think this project is way long overdue. That's why I was kind of disappointed when I see construction was still going on when I flew back to LA in the past few years. And anyone who has to crawl through the last 2 miles at LAX know the pain. People joke that your real friends are the people that are willing to pick you up or drop you off at LAX. That's how bad it is. Most major airports around the country already have systems like this, so I don't know why LA is so far behind. So this is part of a bigger program that's happening at LAX. So the motivation for this is the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Summer Olympics. The whole program, they call it the Landside Access Modernization Program, consists of the SkyTrain that help connect from the terminals to a new parking lot facility, a rental car facility, and a new metro transit hub. And for this video, we only limited the scope to the automated people mover, which is the SkyTrain. So in 2017, they sort of start kicking off the project with the request for quote and doing some procurement activity. This is after they know that LA has won the 2028 Olympic bid. In April 2018 is when the project was officially approved. The LA City Council approved the project and began some pre-construction activity. The initial budget listed on the pamphlet was $1.95 billion, and it stated that it will be complete by 2023. In March of 2019, this is when they did the formal groundbreaking. Come 2020, COVID happened. We went into quarantine, supply chain slowed down. On top of that, it was bad weather as a wet winter, so that was also slowing down the progress at LAX. In 2022 to 2023, this is where they start beginning testings. This is where the initial vehicle run and when they start doing some system tests. But at this point, it's already delayed. The deadline was 2023 to be operational. Early to mid 2024 is when they have a formal dispute between the LAX Airport Authority and LINX, which stand for LAX Integrated Express Solution. This is the integrated team of all the vendors that are working on this project. The arbitrator found that LA Airport Authority has responsibility for significantly delayed the project. On the report, it listed as 526 calendar days. Now, this is when they begin to negotiate settlement. The good thing is they did pass the settlement pretty quick. So from May to August of 2024, the board has approved the settlement of $550 million that will be paid out to the vendors. And the first one is $200 million. This requires an additional $400 million added to the project and therefore increase the total into a $3.3 billion range. In 2025, the airport reported that the project is at the high 90% completion with some system integration testing to be done. As of right now, what we learned is that by January 2026, we should expect the system to be fully operational. So what went wrong? The first one, the obvious one, is COVID. COVID broke everything. From a project manager point of view, this was the ultimate unknown risk. Meaning no one could have reasonably foresee that this could happen and able to plan for the impact. So what is the lesson that we can learn from here? I'm not saying to put global pandemic onto your risk register for every single project you run. That's just too crazy. The real takeaway is we have to accept that there will always be uncontrollable surprises that will show up, and the only way to be ready for it is to bake in a lot of buffer into your timeline and your budget. Here are some of the common known risks that is outside of the project team control. Bad weather, natural disaster event that is unforeseeable. Utility or the site construction. We might discover undocumented underground utility that you need to address before you can start construction. Soil instability, contamination, hazardous material, all that combined. The labor market is also could be a factor too. Let's say if there have labor strikes or labor shortages. Last but not least, material price can spike, and these could be simply supply and demand that's driving the price lower or higher, and also could be driven by geopolitical issues, inflation, trade war. The second lesson is an interesting one. The optimism bias is very expensive. What I mean by that is from the start, the estimate for the cost and the timeline for this project was really too shiny. The airport promised a futuristic train on a small budget and a tight schedule, and didn't account for inflation, regulatory approvals, and also the enormous complexity to build something new and having to integrate with an existing airport. Building a train track surrounded by the active terminal, security zone, and then also live passenger traffic, that is a lot of work. So optimism may win the headlines in the beginning, but it's definitely killed the execution. The vendor require access into the airport system in order to integrate and to test. The public document has listed that is the actual airport authority failed to provide these information or these access to the vendors for them to do their work. So the integration complexity is the center point of this whole legal dispute that I had. And the system integration worked like a domino effect. What I mean by that is if you haven't set up your IT network, for example, you can't test the signaling system. If you can't test the signaling system, the train can't run. On top of that, they have to do all of this work in a very busy and operating airport. So they also have to coordinate the time on when they can test this because they have to follow very strict security and safety protocol, I imagine. Simply put, if the first lesson we talk about that related to COVID was failure to properly account for uncontrollable and unknown risk, this lesson is about downplaying the significant impact of controllable and known risks. The third and the final lesson that I think is the most crucial from a project manager perspective, it's also a contrarian one because they would not admit to this, is governance failure. The LAX SkyTrain was constructed as a 30 years public-private partnership model, where LAX, which is the vendor group, is responsible for design, build, finance, operation, and also maintenance. The airport will fulfill payment upon delivery and when the system is available. This is structured to shift the risk to the private partner, where they supposedly will find way to innovate, will find way to find efficiency, and also providing some upfront capital. In theory, the private side will take on more of the risk, so pretty much this is a performance-based type of contract. And while the public side, in this case the airport, will benefit from a faster delivery and also a more predictable payment system. So however, as construction unfold, it was actually the airport side, as I mentioned earlier, failed to do their part. They failed to grant access to the communication network and failed to help coordinate it with the Metro Transit Center, and that's essentially delaying the integration and testing for this project. And in the report, it has cited is 526 days of delay. So if I was the project manager on this project, I would focus less on building faster, but more on building smarter governance. Here's what I mean by it. In my humble opinion, the decision-making ecosystem can make or break a project this size. So what I would do first is lock down any dependency very early on and assign deadline for those. Before finalizing the contract, I would insist on hard deadline and penalties for all parties for these dependency point within the project plan. If you fail to deliver A, it would impact B and C to progress. So therefore, if you are responsible for A, you must have that deliverable done by a certain date. This one will hold every single party accountable and everyone understand that they are not working in silo. There's always going to be someone dependent on your deliverable. Second point is assemble a central decision board. And I'm talking about the board of all the decision maker needs to come together, not several small multi-committee nightmare stuff. This is a board that would include people from the airport, from the vendor side, from the metro, and also on top of that, any regulators, any regulating party like the FAA and all that need to be in the room to make the decision together. Instead of maybe a 6 week of paper trail work and then, multi-layer of approval, that is just adding delays if we cannot get the decision made right away. The third part is, like I mentioned in my first 2 points, is a very aggressive risk management and resetting expectation. I would add a lot of buffer time for testing of this project because I think building it and setting up the infrastructure isn't the hardest part. It's bringing every pieces together and integrate well is the hardest part. I would reset the expectation with the shareholder. I understand the motivator is the 2026 World Cup. It's coming up, but I rather over-deliver than over-promise. The last but not least is conflict management protocol. When you have arbitration happening in the middle of the project like this, is a death sentence for your momentum. A way to solve for this is to having regular standing dispute review panel so people can come to the table or come to the panel with their conflicts and we get those conflicts addressed without slowing down the progress that we have. Pretty much it's just a fancy way of saying that let's just solve for the small problems before they snowball into a larger issue or a lawsuit, and actually have proof that how this system would work. So in my research for this paper, I came across this paper that helped analyze why the London Heathrow Terminal 5 project was delivered on time and on budget, which is unheard of in the construction world. So the airport owner, the operator, the British Airport Authority decided to bring in-house the task of a system integrators and also a project manager and use a relational contracting strategy with the top tier vendors that they have. Using this strategy, they aim to provide the environment where we all continually challenging each other and see how we can be more successful. Here's a quote from the paper. "We cannot load suppliers with risk, drive prices down, and complain this is costing us more than we thought. It's fundamentally dishonest and economically illiterate. Our approach is we can drive prices down by removing inherent waste and allowing suppliers to have decent return just like us. So in this way of doing the contract, everyone is benefiting from the project and everyone wants to be successful." So what do we learn? Big infrastructure projects fail not just because of global crisis or budgets gone wild, but it's because of weak governance and unrealistic promises. Projects don't fail overnight. They fail in slow motion, one unchecked decision at a time. This is Winnie, and this has been the very first project autopsy in the Inside the Mess series. If you like it, hit that like button, drop me a comment and tell me how I can make these better, because I'm always learning. See you in the next one.